Okay, so we are starting the unit evolution. Please excuse my appearance. I had to sneak downstairs. My kids are sleeping, so they don't bother me. But evolution answers that question for us, like where do we all come from? Um, and you've probably heard of the idea like, oh, that's the evolution means we all came from monkeys. And that is kind of it. That maybe the first humans came from like primates, monkeys, and we evolved over time to become more and more sophisticated until we became the humans that we are today. There's a bit more to it though. I guess before the monkeys, there was like even more simple organisms, so we'll learn about that. So just the idea of evolution is continuous change over time. That would mean that all organisms are related in the tree of life. At the base of the tree there, you can see we all have a common ancestor. So we'll talk about that. And then the idea of evolution, it is a theory, but the word theory means more in science than you might think. Um, like the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. It's a theory, but there's a lot of evidence. Like no matter how many times you do that formula, it works. Okay, so theory is actually a really strong thing in science. So we do have a ton of evidence for the theory of evolution. And one of them is our fossil record. So if we look at our fossils over time, just like we thought, they start out simple and they get more and more complex if we put them in order of age. So that's putting them in order. So we're kind of guessing that the first organisms were just really simple little single-celled organisms that maybe kind of formed out of different atoms. And then we got those more complex cells with all the parts, the nucleus, the mitochondria, the endoplasmic reticulum. So still maybe just one cell, but more complex. And then we started making these multicellular organisms with all these specialized cells, like how we have liver cells and heart cells and brain cells and skin cells, or how a plant, this is a cross-section of a plant, has epithelial cells and guard cells and all these different cells. Okay, so big part of it is that we started out simple and over time we evolved to become more complex. We do have this in our fossil record. We do see changes over time where we get more and more complex. So our oldest fossils are simple and our newer fossils are multicellular. So one piece of evidence for evolution is our DNA. It kind of indicates that we do have a common ancestor because our DNA is so similar. So if you take a mouse and a fly and you find the letters to their genome, you code their genome, or their DNA, you'll see a ton of similarities. Okay, and a mouse and a fly are very, very different organisms, but they have a lot of similarities in their DNA, and that kind of indicates, oh, maybe we did all come from a common ancestor because we do have a lot of the same DNA. Maybe we did all evolve from one first kind of a unicellular simple organism. Another piece of evidence for evolution is our proteins. So besides comparing DNA and seeing a lot of similarities, we can also compare the proteins that we have. So humans and rhesus monkeys have 95% of their proteins are the exact same as ours, indicating that we do have like a relationship. And then even a mouse has 87% of the same DNA as us. A chicken has 69, a frog 54, and even the sea lamprey, a sea animal, that was the one that like has the suckers that attach to a fish, even that has 14% of the same proteins as us. So another clue that we might all be related. We might all have evolved from a common ancestor. Another really interesting piece of evidence that we're all related, we all evolved from the same ancestor, is something called homologous structures. So again, homo means same. So if you look here's a human arm. We have a lot of similarities between a cat, a whale, and a bat. So we all have this humerus. We all have this top bone. It's different in the whale, but we all have a top bone. And then we all have two bones right here, like in our forearm, called the radius and the ulna. So all these different animals all have the one long bone and then the two long bones together. And then we also, in our hands, if you look at a hand of a cat, or the kind of, even whales don't have hands, but this is their fin, and the wings of a bat, it's all like three series of little bones. So you've heard of, like, maybe you've heard of fingers being called phalanges. So we have carpals, metacarpals, and then phalanges. And so do cats. They have these little bones, these little bones, and these little bones. And then so do whales, and so do bats. So we all kind of have the like same little order, series of bones, again indicating that we may all be related and evolved from a common ancestor. So here's the idea: is that we probably maybe all came from one kind of what we call ancestral. We call this like a tetrapod. That it was kind of like this simple animal that we all evolved from. So maybe like some of them evolved into a crocodile, some into birds, some into whales, some into horses, some into bats, some into humans. That we all kind of came from this original simple kind of thing. And before this guy, there was like just like single cells. So again, we all have really similar skeletal structures. So just to sum up, some of our evidence of evolution is that we share the same bone structure, similar to a lot of very different animals, and anything from a cat to a whale to a bat. We have the same proteins as a lot of other animals, and the same DNA as a lot of other animals, indicating that maybe, in fact, we did all kind of come from one original ancestor that we all evolved from, and kind of evolved in different ways.